Welcome everyone to a new video and actually a new little mini series that we're going to do in which I'm going to show you how to build a operating system for your business. Now, most of these things are going to be generic information, right? So you have to tailor it to your own business. But I figured it would be nice to just do something a bit more low key, a bit less structured, and just sort of show you how I build things in Notion. And yeah, for this first video, I want to show you how to build an action tracker that you can use to track all of the actions for your team. And as you can see on this page over here, I made a little outline, but before we build anything, we always just want to make it look good for a moment. So I'm going to add this fire emoji, and I'm just going to add a cover over here. Now, this emoji will actually be important later on. There's a reason why I choose the fire emoji, but I'll explain to you in a little bit why I do that. Okay, so the goal of an action tracker is basically to capture, clarify, process, plan, execute or delete, review, and archive any and all of your team's action items. All of these steps are crucial. This is basically the life cycle of anything that we call an action or a task or whatever it is that you name it in your team. And I'm going to show you all of these different phases, why they matter, and how we can build them inside of Notion. And the first thing that we want to start with is capturing the action item, right? So we're working, we're doing something in our team, we're having a meeting, you have a thought, whatever is going on, all of a sudden you're like, okay, we need to do something, right? Something needs to happen. So what we do is we create an action, and maybe you jot that down on your personal to-do list, or you have some other place where you track all of your actions. We want this place to be a central database in which we capture all of the action items that anybody comes up with in our entire team. So that's the first thing that we're going to do. Over here, I'm going to say, create me a database. For now, I'm going to make this an inline database so that we can see this list over here. I will set the page width to full. And now we have a full-sized page with a database on it. So this database, I'm going to call the action tracker database. Actually, yeah, I'm going to call it the action tracker database. And yeah, if you're completely new to Notion, databases are the lifeblood of any good Notion system. Databases are where we collect and organize large amounts of information. So everything in this series is going to be a database, and the simplest one, or at least the most essential one that we'll build, is the action tracker database. Okay, so the first thing we do is we create a central database. The second thing that we want to do is we want to have possibilities or options to capture actions into this database. Now, the easiest way to do that is by just creating a page over here. I just created a new page in this database, right? And just like that, create a new page in this database. But there is different ways that we can capture actions into this central database. And later on, I'm going to show you some of the hacks and tricks on how to do this. So I'm just going to leave this one unchecked for now. And then the last thing that we want to do for this capture section is that we want to have a central action inbox. So this is going to be a place where we can see all of the actions that have been captured and that still need to be processed. And the way we do this is by basically creating a status property inside of this database. So I'm going to say status, and then the most basic status is not started, in progress, and done. So the moment an action comes in, it has not yet been started. Then later on, as we're working on it, it's in progress. And then when we're done, it's completed over here. Or when it's completed, we set it to done. Okay, so this is very basic. We now have an action tracker database over here with our action inbox. But there's a problem over here, because if I add an action here, and this one has the status of in progress, I also see it inside of this database. So what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to create what is called a database view. And let me see if I can actually do that inside of an inline database. I don't actually think that's possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this into a page, and I'm going in here. Okay, so now we have this same database, but now as a big page. And the first thing that I want to do is I create a new view over here. So I'm going to say create a new view of this database, an empty view, and I'm going to call this one the action inbox. Now, the reason why I said before that this fire emoji is so important is that we want to use the emojis to denote which database we are using. So over here, I'm going to set the fire emoji into this view, because later on, we're going to take these views from these different databases and we're going to resurface them in different parts of the system. But for now, I'm just going to keep it over here. This is going to be the action inbox. And actually what I want to say is that I only want to see all of the actions that have not yet been started. So over here, I can apply a filter. I'm going to say status is not started. Boom. And now we have an action inbox. All of the actions that have not yet been started are the only ones that are going to be displayed inside of this view. And the moment I put one of these to in progress, or if I put it to done, it is automatically going to disappear from this view. Okay, so that's the first thing that we do. We create a place to capture all of our action. Now, the next thing that we want to do is clarify the action item, because very often something will come in, but it's just a very raw idea, right? It's like, write this essay or prepare this presentation. They're very vague things, and we want to clarify them before we can actually put them into the system. There's a bunch of different things that we want to clarify. First of all, we always want to add a proper name, right? We want to have a very clear name that describes the action that we want to do. Secondly, we might want to add a little description. If we want to provide some context, particularly if we're creating something for someone else, we might want to add a little description. Then we want to have the status, which we already added. Then we want to have an assignee, which means who is going to do this action item. We want to add a due date, and we want to have some metadata like when it has been created and who it has been created by. Okay, so I'm actually going to open up this one again, but I'm just going to open it in a different tab. And then over here, we're going to start adding these properties. Okay, so first one we have over here is the name, right? Action name. Cool. We already have that one. Second one we have over here, status. We also already have that one, so we can just keep that over here. Then we want to have a due date. This is the date on which we want this action to be done. And then we want to have the assignee, right? So this is the person who is going to be working on this action item. So I'm just going to call that one assignee. And then we want to have the description and we want to have the metadata. Okay, so I'm going to say for description, I'm going to actually make text over here. I'm going to say description. And what you see is that Notion actually pre-fills a lot of these fields, or they make suggestions for pre-fills based on what the database is about, right? So it already knows like, okay, you have all of these other things. This will most likely be a description. Last things that we want to do is the time that it has been created and the person that has created it. Now, for a moment there, you saw when I drag this column over here, it actually makes the database bigger. If you want to turn off this option, you can go into layout and you can say unwrap all of the columns. And that way, when something overflows any of the cells, the database itself doesn't expand. I usually like to do this because it's a bit more pretty. So we can do that right over here. Okay, so like that, we've added all of the things that we need to clarify our action items. We're just going to tick off these boxes real quick. Because basically what we can do now is we can have our inbox over here. And I'm just going to add an action. And I'll just put this one in the back. And then whenever we empty our inbox, I can just say, okay, this action over here is actually create the first 10 sheets for the pitch deck. I can just add that over here. And then I can give some extra context. Harold is doing the pitch. Next week, we should prep the first 10 sheets on the GTM strategy. And then I'm going to assign that to Harold. Harold does not exist in my team space, but you can assign it to Harold. And then if there is a due date, so what I like to do, right? Normally, I like to organize and process all of my actions using the status. So we ideally want to work in sprint cycles. And actually during our sprint, we want to put certain actions from a backlog into a to-do list. And then during the sprint, they go from to-do to in progress to done, right? So that is how most actions live. But some things have a due date, right? Like a date that it really needs to be done. A deadline, you can also say. But I don't like the word deadline because the word dead is in there. It feels very rigid. And yeah, I don't really like it. But sometimes actions do need a due date. So then over here, you can say, okay, this really needs to be done before July 24th. Now, a little trick that I like to add here, so I'm actually going to show you, is to create a formula that will show us how many days we have left before something needs to be done. So over here, I'm going to create a formula. And let's see, we have it over here. I'm actually just gonna copy paste this in. And basically what this formula does is it checks how many days are between the due date and between today. And based on that, it is going to, first of all, show us how many days are left. And it's also going to apply some styling. So if we have more than 60 days left, it's going to be gray. If we have more than 45 days left, it's going to be green. If we have more than 30 days left, it's going to be yellow. And if it's less than 15 days, it's going to be orange. So over here, I'm going to set this one to done. And now over here, you can see this one is due in 6 days. Okay, so later on, we can use this for some formatting to just make everything a bit more visually appealing and also clear in the communication. Okay, so we have added all of these things that we need to clarify our action item. Now, the next thing that we want to do is we want to process it, right? So now we know what to do, but now it needs to be actually put into the system in which we are actually going to use these action items. There's 3 main properties that we need to create for this. The first one is the team. Which team does this action item belong to? The second one is the project or the goal, depending on what structure you use. And then the third one is actually using it in the sprint cycle. Now, these are all going to become separate databases later on in this series. But for now, we're just going to keep one simple database. So I'm going to go back in there and I'm going to say, okay, I want to have a team property. And for now, I'm just going to say product, and we're going to say BizDev, and we're going to say leadership, and maybe we'll do marketing. Okay, so we're starting simple. These are the teams that we have. And then over here, we're going to say projects. And this one might actually build the spaceship, maybe is one project. And the other one is colonize the moon. Okay, cool. These are the projects that we're currently working on. Okay, so now the database is really starting to come together, right? We have a whole bunch of properties to sort of describe and process this action item. And that means we can actually move into making it more practical, because once we have our action and we know what it is and we know who needs to do it, then we actually want to plan the action item, right? Okay, so there's a few things that we want to do when we plan an action item. And like I mentioned before, this is something that we do during the sprint cycle. So in a moment, we're going to create a view for our sprint cycle, but there's a few things that we want to do with these actions when we plan them. The first one is that we want to estimate a workload, right? Every knowledge worker has a limited amount of productive hours in a day. So we want to make a small estimation, a brief estimation of how much time and energy we think something is going to take. Then the next thing that we want to do is we want to finalize the due date and the status, right? We're moving it now from our backlog into what we want to do. Then we also want to finalize the assignee, right? Who is going to be working on this action item. And this one we already did. It's just a little aesthetic thing to calculate the days left. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add one more property over here. And I'm going to call these the workload blocks. And what I personally like to do is get this little square emoji in there. I'm just going to say, okay, workload block 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to say 1 yellow, 2 orange, 3 is going to be red. And then we're actually going to add some extra faces to this status property. So what we can do over here is we can say edit this property. And over here, I'm actually going to say in the to-do section, I'm going to add a backlog. That's going to be the backlog. And then this one is actually going to be to-do. Opa. To-do. And I'll give that one purple color. Then we're going to have all of the statuses of actions that are in progress. And the first one is going to be in progress. The second one is going to be stuck / waiting, right? Maybe we're waiting for someone and this action item can currently not be completed. And then on the done section, we're going to say done or archived. I'm going to put that one over here. Boom. Okay. That is already much better. Cool. The limitation that we have here is that everything is displayed in a table view, right? This is just a very simple table, and that's fine if you want to see everything, but this is way too chaotic and way too overwhelming for actually planning things. So what we're going to do is we're going to create another view of this database. Now, database views are a way to get insight into a very specific slice of a database. So we only want to display a few entries, a few properties, and in a certain way. The thing is that when you change something in one view, you change it in the entire database. So they're a different window, but it's all a window into the same database. And this is why we always create a system with database at its foundation. And then we have these different views throughout the system to help us interact with that system. The view I'm going to create over here is actually going to be a board. I'm going to call this action Kanban. And then once again, over here, just going to add that fire emoji. If it registers, let's try that again. Action Kanban, boom. And you can already see this is starting to come together a little bit. This already looks much better. We now have a nice flow and we can drag our actions all the way from a backlog into a to-do section, into a progress, and we sort of have a flow of the action item. But I also want to display a bit more information over here. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to go in here to the property visibility, and I'm actually going to enable this formula that we created, which is when it is due. I'm also going to enable who it is assigned to, and I'm also going to enable the workload blocks. So now it's already much better because we get to see a bit more information. I can see, okay, create these first 10 sheets that is due in 6 days, right? So it's not just only part of this Kanban process, but it has an actual deadline. And then over here, I can also see how much work this is going to take. This is going to take 3 work blocks. So that's probably going to be a pretty tough task to complete. Now, another cool thing about Notion is that any entry inside of a database is also a page in and of itself. So you can actually open this entry, and over here you have a page in which you can add more context. And at the top of this page, you see all of the information that is being tracked in this database. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to customize this layout a little bit. I'm going to move this into the panel, and I'm actually going to pin a few properties over here. The first one I'm going to pin is going to be this formula. Let me actually say pin. I'm going to pin the formula, the person it is assigned to, the status of the action, and the project that it's related to. And then over here, I'm going to add some more sections. And the first section I'm going to add is the description, right? We want to see that description if there's more context that we need. Then the second we can do is the workload blocks. And actually for now, we're just going to leave it at this. Okay, so this already looks much cleaner. Basically what we can do now is when we're in this Kanban and I see this task, I want to get some extra context. Description is right over here. I have the extra context that I need to work on this action item. So this is already very beautiful, but there is more that we can do. Over here, I'm just going to tick all of these boxes, because now we actually want to plan these action items during a sprint, because this current view has all of the actions on it. But maybe we want to have a view just for the product team. So I'm going to call this product team sprint. And then I'm going to apply a filter that says all of the actions on this board, I want them to be related to the product team. So now it's only going to show me actions that have actually been tagged for the product team. And the beauty of Notion is that when I add an action from this view, it's automatically also going to be tagged to this team. So let's say, for example, design a new dashboard. If I open this one up, you will see over here, it's automatically assigned to the product team. Now, actually in this view, I want to see a few more things, because I also want to see which project this is part of, and I want to be able to set a due date. So now when I set a new action item, assign it to someone, give it a workload block, give it a project, and if it has a deadline, over here, you will also see that it is due in 5 days. Now, at the moment, I am filling in this information here in this Kanban view, but we just built all of this other infrastructure. And basically what happens is that by the time the action comes into this sprint view, it already has all of this context. And then all we need to do is during our bi-weekly sprint, drag things from the backlog into the to-do section. And then as the sprint is progressing, we can just take our actions and say, okay, this one is now in progress. Actually, it's stuck or waiting. And then at the end of the week, it is done. So now we have finished creating our sprint. Then the next thing that we want to do is execute on the action items. And for this execution phase, we're going to make two dashboards. One is going to be the personal action dashboards on which you see all of your personal actions. And then the other one is going to be the team action dashboard. So let's go back in here. And actually the first one that we're going to create is for the team because it's very similar to this product one. I'm just going to duplicate this. I'm just going to call this product actions. And it is functionally going to be the same dashboard, but the only thing that I'm going to change is actually from this, all these statuses that you see over here, I'm going to hide the backlog and I'm going to hide the archive. So I just want to see everything that we're working on during this sprint. And now on this board, we're going to see all of the action items that our team is working on. Then the other one that we're going to do is I'm going to call them my actions. And in here, I'm actually going to change the filter. And instead of saying all actions need to be assigned to the team product, I'm going to say all actions need to be assigned to me. And now it's only going to show actions that have been assigned to me. So if I create something over here, you can see it is assigned to Fran. And this is what I meant earlier. All of the actions are still living in the whole master database, but they're just going to be shown in different ways, in different views to different people. And like this, we have a central architecture, but we can give specific pieces of information to the people that need it, right? We can get the right resources to the right people at the right time. And that is always what we're trying to do with knowledge work. So over here, we now have my action view and we have a product action view. And later on in later videos, we can use this to create dashboards, but this is basically everything that we wanted to do for this section. So I'm just going to say, okay, personal action dashboard and a team action dashboard. Last phase before we get into the end part of this video, we want to be able to review all of the actions that we completed in our previous sprint, because over here we created a sprint planning, right? This is something that we're going to do at the beginning of every sprint, but then actually at the end of a sprint, we also want to reflect back on the things that we did. So what we can do over here is actually go and say a list view. And these are going to be all of the completed actions. And I'm going to put this over here. And we're going to say, okay, these should be all of the actions of the product team. And we now want to show all of the actions that we completed in the past 2 weeks. So before we can do that, we need to create an automation. And the way we can do this is basically we can say whenever a certain trigger happens, whenever something gets triggered, we can do a certain action. So I'm going to say whenever a status is changed into done, I want to set, actually I need to create a new property for this because we want to create a date, which we're going to call date completed. And I'm going to say in this automation, whenever the status is changed to done, I want to take this property called date completed, and I want to set that to the date triggered. So basically what this does, and I will show you that over here, is that whenever an action item is put on done, and of course it disappears from our inbox, over here you can now see that it has automatically added the date on which it was done. And now what we can do in this view over here, this completed action view, we can say, okay, I want to see all of the actions that have a date completed in the past, let's say 2 weeks. Let's say we do bi-weekly sprints. It's going to be everything that we finish in the past 2 weeks. And now we go back into our action Kanban. Just going to remove these for a moment. And now when I drag this to done, the automation is triggering in the background. And when I go to completed action, you can see all of the actions that we completed in the past 2 weeks. So just like this, we have a very easy review of everything that we have completed. Okay, so that is the automation, the past sprint cycle view. And then one last thing that we can do is that when we want to archive all of these actions, it's a little bit of manual work to have to go here and say, okay, edit this property. And I actually want to put all of these to archived. Like that would be one option on how to do it. But another option on how to do it is by actually creating a button. So what we can say over here is we're going to create a button. And I'm going to say archive actions. And of course, we're going to use the fire emoji because that is the one we use for the action tracker database. I'm going to say, okay, when this button is clicked, I want to edit all of the pages inside of our action tracker database, but I don't want to edit all of the pages. I just want to edit the pages that have a status of done and that have a date completed that is in the past week. So now when I press this button, let me actually see, why are we... we still need to edit the property. So we're going to say, okay, when those conditions are met, then actually set this status to archive. Okay, boom, just like that. I've now created this button and I will show you over here. We'll go back into completed actions. These are all set to done, but the moment I press this button, it's going to edit these pages and now they're all archived, right? So we can make an easy button with which we automatically archive all of our action items that have already been done. Just like that, we've now created this entire flow. But as you can see over here, there is still one thing missing, and that is the quick capture of the action items, because we still don't have a really good way to easily capture an action item into this database. And there's actually a very beautiful and relatively new feature that Notion has released, which is the form. So what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to say create form, and I'm actually going to call this action capture. Right? We can quick capture actions in here. And basically I can now use all of the database properties that we have over here and turn them into questions. So the first one's going to be the name. What's going to be the name of the action? The second one is going to be a description. The third one is going to be a team. The fourth one is going to be a person. And then the fifth one, due date. Sixth one, project. Okay, now, of course, we can also add some descriptions. So over here, we can explain, add a proper name for the action. Describe what this action entails, right? We could just fill out this form, but basically this is going to be a form to easily capture new action items into our database. And now I'm just going to go back into the central page. And once again, we're going to create a button. And we'll just put it on the fire emoji. And we're going to say capture new action. And whenever this button is clicked, what we want to do is we want to open the form that we just created, right? And did we give this form a name? I don't think we did. So I'm just going to say action capture form. And to be consistent with our emojis, we're going to add that fire. Like, as you can see, I am very consistent with these emojis. And the reason I'm doing this is because as the system is growing, we're going to have all of these different views. And our brain has a tendency to recognize patterns, right? We always want to be consistent in our designs because our brain has a tendency to recognize patterns, and it just makes it easier for us to interact and navigate a system. So if I always use the fire emoji for the action tracker database, whenever this emoji shows up somewhere, you immediately knows, that is related to actions, right? So it makes it easier to communicate more with less. So over here we have the fire emoji, and I'm going to say, okay, open action capture form. I'm going to open it in full page and done. Boom. Okay, so now whenever I press this button, and over here I can write, okay, rewrite the design specs for the Notion system. The client wasn't happy with the current setup. Can we adjust it to meet their needs? Product team might want to assign it to a person, might want to give it a due date, and maybe connect it to a project. And I'm going to submit this action. Boom, it is done. I can go back into my central page. And then if I go in here and I go to our product sprint, then over here, you can now see rewrite the design specs for the Notion system, right? So just like that, we have closed the bridge. We can capture an action item. It is stored inside of the central database. We have our inbox during which we can process all of the actions. We then clarify things, giving it the information that it needs. We can then assign it to the right parts of our system, right? The right team, the right project, and throw it into that sprint cycle. Then during that sprint cycle, we can estimate the workload. We can finalize the status, the due date, and the person that needs to do it. And we have this little formula that shows us how many days are left for anything with the due date. And then as we're moving through our sprint, right, as we're going through this 1 or 2 week cycle, we have our personal action board with all of our personal actions, and we have our team action board with all of our team actions. And then at the end of every sprint, we review the actions that we completed in the past 2 weeks. And when we've done that, we have this button to now archive the actions. And just like that, we went through the entire life cycle of an action item. Now, this is just a basic setup, a starting setup. As this system is progressing, as we're going to build more parts of the system, this is going to integrate with all of the other parts of your system, right? We're going to be able to assign an action in the context of a specific project dashboard or of a specific team member dashboard or in a specific OKR dashboard, right? So there's all these ways that we're going to integrate these databases. But for now, I think this is a good basis. Let me know if you like these sort of videos. I'm happy to create more of this, just something different, just showing you how to build some things in Notion. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your time. Enjoy the build, have fun, and see you for the next one.